guys. Happy hump day to everyone. Today is Wednesday, May 21st, the year of our Lord 2025. And this is Coffee with J.C. Shurburtt. Thanks for tuning in this morning. Baseball action yesterday. The season's mercifully over now. Gamecocks took a 1-0 lead early. Florida came right back. Gamecocks showed some signs of life at times. Florida kept coming right back. Kind of a microcosm of the season when this team does not play well. 11-3, the final. Gators move on in the SEC tournament. And year one of the Paul Mainieri era was the disaster, right? It's one season, but this you combine this with some of the seasons Mark Kingston had. He had two stinkers, and we don't know what would have happened in 2020, but that team was a little shaky to start with at 12-4 when they called everything off. But this is rock bottom for this program, job program team. I always say that. And so this is a program situation. They made a move last year with the intent on getting back to that next level, and it blew up in everybody's face. And there's a lot of blame to go around. You guys know how I felt about it. 6-29 against teams with a pulse. No offense to anybody else that they played during the season. I mean, USC Upstate was a conference champion. Hats off to the Spartans, the old alma mater, right? So hats off to them. There were some good teams they played in there, and it's no disrespect but to those teams. But Clemson, North Carolina, and then the whole SEC, 6-29. Unbelievable. In the worst years, there has not been that kind of mark. The Gamecocks have shown some life against some good teams, but in baseball, you will win games every now and then, just like the other night. The Gamecocks beat the number one team in the country. That's always nice, but it's a overtime percentage game. They say all the time when you hit the ball, you may get out 7 out of 10 times, and that's good. But so the numbers are not like, it's not like football, obviously, where, every win and loss obviously matters. But 6-29 is awful. The Chicago White Sox won 41 games last year over 162 games, people. So, you multiply this times 2, 12-58, do the math. What are you then, 18-87? That's a similar type season. And then this is South Carolina baseball, not a mismanaged pro team that really is designed just to fleece the fans and make money. South Carolina baseball does not make any money. So it's not a for-profit enterprise, as a lot of us, that's kind of a focus in college athletics these days. Paul Mainieri, after the game, said all the coaching staff's coming back. He defended Terry Rooney. He called him an elite recruiter and an elite pitching coach. Talked about coming back next year, reloading with players, transfer portal. He went through it, JUCOs, high school guys, transfer portal. They do have a commitment from a JUCO that's a pretty good player, Caleb Hoover, that a lot of people like, a lot of baseball folks like. Slugger, had offers from Texas and Oklahoma State and a lot of teams out that way. He's from Texas, junior college out in Texas. I think called Grayson College. It's not like Blinn or some of the ones that play football that we kind of are more familiar with. It's a smaller college, smaller or under the radar junior college. Let's put it that way. So, and he kind of went through the three, and he said when the transfer portal opens, they're going to be very aggressive. I can confirm that, they're going to have some money to spend, and really by comparison to the rest of the SEC, because the rest of the budgets are in this sport are getting kind of chopped, namely because when you're doing the finances with rev share and all that, there's now 25 scholarships instead of 11.7 at most places. That does cost money. And so the actual cash payments you're getting, probably not going to be as much. There's, one school out there that paid one player $600,000 2 years ago. And my understanding is that particular school's entire budget for NIL in baseball, once rev share kicks in, is going to be just a little bit more than that on average. So, one thing I can say is that, Jeremiah Donati so far in both of these situations, men's basketball and baseball, and they're different other than the bad record. A lot different situation in both sports. There's different standards, quite frankly. I mean, everybody wants to win at everything, but in basketball, it's a great year if you make the postseason. In baseball, that's a baseline expectation. And really, as we found out with Mark Kingston, if you get to a regional, it's just not good enough over time in this sport. Not here, not when you've won national championships. And I've said before, you can't cling to that forever. And I got in a little bit of trouble for it. People thought I was disrespecting that. No, those were two of the greatest years of my life. I mean, two the greatest moments. I mean, I never thought in my lifetime. I was born in 1976. Kind of started following college sports heavily about 86. I never knew the Gamecocks had never won any kind of national championship, and then women's track won it in '02, and 2010 baseball comes chugging around. I never, I didn't know if I would live to see it. So absolutely, I wasn't trying to diminish it. I just, I kind of like to think about the future. That's why I used to get kind of squirrely with people that would say Steve Spurrier's the only coach that'll ever win here. People thought I was coming down on Spurrier, and I was kind of critical of the roster that he left. And the staff he hired at the end. But looking back on it, greatest coach to ever coach here. And while Shane Beamer's off to a good start, he hadn't called him yet. He hadn't accomplished all those things yet. First 4 years, Beamer's probably got him beat. If you dive in to the numbers and the wins and the players and recruiting and all that, but that's only 4 years. So, but I think what Beamer's proving in football is you reject that. It's always look to the future. I'm always kind of one of those guys that just keep going. The past is the past. Sustaining things around here in various programs has been an issue, and baseball is consistent for a long time. 16, 17 years. It's almost 2 decades. So nobody's used to this in that sport. Nobody's really used to the last 12 years in this sport. So, I always kind of looked to the future. And I wasn't trying to diminish those accomplishments. I was just saying, and it's maybe time to just quit walking around thinking, hey, you're South Carolina baseball and, getting mad about this, that, and the other and what might have been, namely, if had Ray Tanner not been the AD, and I'm not going to get into that. Obviously, the hires in baseball that an AD makes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. To use a baseball analogy, it's strike three. I mean, and look, in honesty, if when Aries coming back, it seems obviously. So the book is yet to be written. This team, something happens unexpectedly against what I think, and more importantly than what I think, what a lot of baseball folks think. This team gets to Omaha next year. It's not a bad hire. I mean, there's still a chance, just like all those teams Tanner coached that were down and the win anyway thing. So we don't really know yet, but this is you can't sit there and just say, after 6-29, and that's the record I'm going to talk about, 6-29, and in your conference 6-24, worst ever. I never thought after 8-22 a few years back, when the whole pitching staff was hurt, I never thought it would get that bad again. Not with this program, and they did bounce back pretty nicely. I think that was 2022. I think in 2023, or was that 19? Was that 19? It was a 1 year. I think it was 19. It was Kingston's second year. Anyway, I never thought I'd see that again. None of you did either. And so This was even worse. This league, and as Whittle pointed out on the Big Spur, it really wasn't that tough of a schedule by comparison to everybody else when you look at the records. So I don't know, man. I don't know. But one thing I will say about Jeremiah Donati, the new athletic director, based on offseason and men's basketball. And look, there's a difference. And here we go. Okay. The AD, and this is an AD talk here. The AD is responsible for giving coaches, for hiring and firing coaches, and for giving coaches every resource available to succeed within reason if they're not going to make a change. And it ends there. So, regardless of anybody's opinion about the basketball transfer portal class, and to me, it's a mystery. You may as well talk about a basketball team on Jupiter because I don't know. I mean, I look at these guys and nobody's really going to jump off the page at anybody. And I think everybody kind of sees other schools go out there and sign this guy and that guy. And then Ziegler from Tennessee is suing the NCAA for another year. Florida just got a big time transfer from Arkansas. And then one of their big men came out of the draft. And so everybody sees that and they get excited. And here's Carolina with a bunch of guys that, nobody's heard of or they have heard of them. And they got 14 guys on the roster. And, you don't, I mean, it's not like, oh, we got these two studs coming in to help. But with basketball, too, on the flip side of that, and again, I don't have an opinion. I don't know anything about basketball on Jupiter. I was listening to Space Oddity by David Bowie earlier. Ground control to Major Lamont. Anyway, I have no idea. A lot of people I talk to that really follow the stuff, they're not excited or confident. But I also know some of the feedback I've gotten internally is these guys all fit what he does, and they're willing to go out there and play within the system. And I've said before that 126 games a couple of years ago, that's not a bad way to roll, in basketball at this institution. But that's basketball. And they had a lot more, a ton more money to go spend NIL and rev share wise. So I can report to you that baseball will have the same. And then whereas teams around the SEC kind of were charging, and around the country in men's basketball, charging towards the finish line because everybody got in the portal. I mean, everybody was looking to get paid. So there were a lot of players, a lot of crap, a lot of bad players, but there were a lot of players looking to pay, and everybody's spending to get in ahead of that house settlement deadline. We've explained it. In baseball, because we're kind of coming up against it, and things could change if they punt the house settlement and they end up going to court and it doesn't get approved, which would be, listen to Coffee that day. I'll have some really ridiculously harsh things to say about the NCAA and their attorneys. If they don't, then maybe it's a free for all again. But what you want to do when that portal opens in early June, get the guys in. There's not as much time to kind of with the Eagle staffs situations like there was in hoops to get it rolling. And baseball's a lot different in the sense that, there's some guys out there that, some schools may be looking at them to do one thing, but Carolina wants them to do another. There's players to go around. And then, JUCO ball in baseball has not gone anywhere. Even with the transfer portal, Arkansas and Oklahoma both had a bunch of junior college players, and they're pretty good this year. Whereas in football and basketball, the JUCO route, let's just say there's less of them, than maybe there used to be. But, so you can go the JUCO route, you can go the portal route in baseball. And be just fine. But I can report to you that South Carolina, relative to the rest of the SEC, whereas in hoops and in football, top half definitely, competitive definitely. In baseball, they could end up being top 2, top 3 at the end of the day. Baseball matters at this institution, the University of South Carolina, probably abnormally more than other places. It's what South Carolina when all that winning started happening back in the day, this is kind of how it got started. It's been a great baseball program, school, job for over 50 years since Bobby Richardson came. This is the 50th anniversary of the first time this baseball program played for the national championship. The fan support's unreal, and not just when you're winning, but what you don't do to I'm winning big, but what you don't do to the baseball, the baseball fan base, what you don't do to them is underachieve and underperform. Right? They're smarter than that. The core baseball folks at this school, it's not, and it's eroded a bit over time since Tanner left. But I can remember Gamecocks being down 7 runs and the place is still packed. Nobody's leaving. Whereas in football, you get down 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, everybody's going to the parking lot. And maybe I'm getting old. That's the recurring theme here on coffee and everything else. And maybe it's just not that way anymore. But I think that I still think that magic's there. But what you're doing to these folks, the hardcore baseball people, is you're underperforming, and that's unacceptable at the University of South Carolina in this sport, and they will not show up, and I do not blame them. They are not bad fans for not wanting to go out there and sit through a bad movie over and over again. The movie Ishtar with Dustin Hoffman is probably known as one of the worst movies ever made. I would not go sit through that over, and I would not go to the matinee every day and watch that over and over again. I don't care if popcorn's $1. Right? I don't even like popcorn. Anyway, that's so this season's unacceptable. I will say that the administration is doing their job outside of firing somebody, and if that's not an option, then what do? You still want to win. I can respect that. I think that some athletic programs that are mad at their coach, like Auburn football was mad at Brian Harsin, that just are like, oh, we'll let him bleed out because we just won't give any money to put together a roster. Or maybe they did, and just didn't work out. But, you let them bleed out and then we'll get behind the new guy. I don't think that's right, because why would you waste a season? So I commend, and I don't agree with keeping Pulmonary. I think this is a mistake. I think there's obvious reasons why it is. And I hope I'm wrong. I'll be the biggest Pulmonary homer on the planet if they turn it around, and I won't be being hypocritical because I'm telling you guys that. Everybody wants what's best, right? And you just never know. I'm just saying it's looking bleak, and I have serious doubts. And so he said after the game, no, he's not firing Terry Rooney at all, which you've got bad pitching, and obviously something went cattywampus in the recruiting last year, and Rooney's in charge of both. And believe me, he's in charge. Monty Lee, who, by the way, I think this with regards to Coach Lee and Chris Gordon and everybody else on staff, if you're going to keep those two that are running the show, it's probably just for the best for recruiting purposes, relationship wise, to keep Monty Lee and Chris Gordon and everybody else. If that's what if keeping everything intact is what the call is, and it does look like that because Pulmonary said that, and then he also said nobody else is getting fired either, then it's best to do that because what Monty Lee can do is find players, build relationships, and land guys. Now, as far as deciding who to take and who gets what, that's not Monty Lee's not the recruiting coordinator anymore. As far as deciding what the lineup is, the hitting coach does not decide that at South Carolina. So, that's the other two. So they're, as George W. Bush used to say, the deciders. They're the deciders. So, but in recruiting, we all know it's about relationships, evaluation, things like that. And so my thing is, if everybody's staying, everybody just needs to stay. And it looks like, based on Pulmonary's response after the game, that they are. We're going to talk about this. I'm jumping on the morning show with JB at 10, and we're going to have a big post-mortem baseball discussion. After that, on the morning show, a little exciting thing. Darren Usher, the South Carolina football director of player personnel, will jump on. I'm going to jump off for that and let JB pepper him with questions. But Darren's always a great interview. He gives really good, long, lengthy answers. There's a lot of meat on that bone. And we're heading into official visit season. And then, of course, Phil and I will be along with the show after that. So official visit season. Let's talk football, folks. Get baseball finished 28-29. We'll talk about it on the morning show. So I got to apologize to the coffee audience because the other week I sat there and was talking about official visitors the first weekend and went through everything. And there were in our database a list of visitors, and I had kind of kept track of them and didn't know. And lo and behold, the next day I didn't know this. Hale McGranahan was kind of working to correct the list and reaffirm, and some of the information was old. And I said I broke down a bunch of guys that are not visiting. And then we talked about that later. A few defensive tackles. Brian Harris from Jacksonville was one of them. He's supposed to commit in 2 days. It won't be to Carolina. So that was disappointing, that the D tackles all canceled. But so that was old information, and I feel very embarrassed for going through an entire episode. You folks, fine folks listening to all of it. And so I'm going to correct the record. And we're going to go through the first 2 weeks of official visitors because they're right around the corner, 9 days from today, after Memorial Day weekend. That first batch goes, and I'm looking through it. A lot of out-of-state guys coming in. 2 in-state players in the first 2 weeks are visiting officially, and they're both already committed to South Carolina. I don't know if they intentionally did this, but this is a lot of out-of-state players. Quite a few guys from state of Alabama. It's never a bad deal to go recruit Alabama. As far as finding under the radar players, it's worked at South Carolina. I've seen guys go to Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and then Georgia from Alabama that end up being really good. That state puts out players, and you can find in that next tier below Alabama and Auburn, really good ones. So nothing wrong with that. Love the football in the state of Alabama. Love the state of Alabama. It reminds me of South Carolina in a lot of ways because of the college sports madness there. All right. So here's the new group of official visitors coming in. There's 1, 2, 3, 6, 8 of them. PJ Dean, we've talked about him. His brother is Jared Wilson, who just departed the University of Georgia. Offensive line, defensive line. Georgia says D-line. South Carolina says either. It's Georgia or South Carolina. Big 4-star guy. These decisions, normally the guy follows the brother, right? Especially if the brother had a great experience, which he did. Normally that's what happens. Georgia was the first to kind of talk to him about D-line. So I would lean Georgia here, but he clearly says top 2, Georgia and South Carolina. There is some precedent. Jalewis Solomon ended up committing to Auburn and then flipped and came back to South Carolina. His brother went to Auburn. His other brother's going to Georgia. So his family's got a lot of driving to do, right? So I'm not going to rule it out. Carolina's done a really good job with him, but I would think Georgia. Carter Meadows is a defensive end right there. As far as 24/7 sports goes, he's right there on that 4-star border. Kind of reminds you of the kid last year from Alabama that Carolina led on for, was it Jared Smith? Was his name? Jared Smith. He ended up at Auburn at the end. Carolina thought they had him. Kind of that type of player. Thinner, gonna have to put on weight. Probably a year 2 guy to really get going. But boy, he's good. Quick first step. He's from DC. It doesn't hurt that Nick Harbor and Dylan Stewart and Zabari Sandy, all from the district, are there. And then you have surrounding areas, Tree Babalade, or Babalade, as someone said the other day. From Maryland, Michael Goodwine is from up there. That's been a good spot for Carolina. And I think, people ask me all the time, well, who would you like to see them get? And I'm funny because I'm a recruiting nerd. the kids from up there, I'll keep the pipeline going. I mean, and there's guys in that area too that are ranked really high that Carolina hadn't even sniffed. Zion Ely seems to be number two player in the country. He's from Maryland. He seems to be wanting to go to Maryland and stay at home and play for the Terps and all that. So I, you know, I think getting one or two every year from up there keeps it going. When ultimately, inevitably, you get to the post Dylan Stewart and Nick Harbor era, you want to keep guys down there, keep those relationships going, and they have. There's a lot of players in DC and Maryland. I mean, relative to geographic landmass, there's a lot of players there. And a lot of schools have made a living off of it. Larry Johnson, who's at Ohio State now, was at Penn State for years under Joe Paterno. And Paterno made it like they're in New Jersey. Penn State just raided them. And then Rutgers and Maryland came into the league, and now the entire Big Ten raids. But the Terps do have Zion Ely, and then there's other guys up there. So Carolina they're a little selective as far as who they go after, or they're guys that just aren't interested. But you want to continue to rock and roll with it. You want to continue to get guys. And Carter Meadows had a fantastic visit for the spring game. Now, the competition's stiff. Competition's very stiff. He's the number 33, 34 player in the country. This next guy, also from up there, also competition very stiff. Maryland's not in the ball game for this next guy, Kyrie Adams, and our insider from our Maryland site at 24/7 Sports says that he's kind of a brand guy. Oregon is up there. There's a lot, but Kyrie Adams, a big 6'1" corner. I mean, really good player. I say all the time, Torian Gray can take your 2 and 3 stars and make them NFL guys, or take your 4 and 5 stars and make them NFL guys. And this is a 4 or 5 star guy. Elite guy, elite prospect, would send a statement if the Gamecocks got him. And, so of the three I've mentioned so far, obviously this is going to be a theme. Competition is stiff. These are dog fights in recruiting. And, it's going to be disappointing for all of you out there when guys pick other schools, but I'm going to tell you, inevitably, many of these guys will. The idea is to get your share. And there's really two tracks to this, is get your share, but then also there are some positions that are more important than others, namely defensive tackle. So that's just kind of as we head into this official visit season. That's how to kind of look at it. Now, if you don't get your share and you strike out on everybody, well, then it's time to scramble, and maybe it's a big portal year. Who knows? The good news is you got a good in-state base. A lot of these are out-of-state guys. Travis Johnson. Now, this is in talking to, I guess, was it on the phone or talking about like the big 6'4", 6'5" receivers. I don't know when maybe it's an interview. Oh, it was on 107.5 yesterday. Bill Gunner, my man, Wild Bill Gunner. Okay, so he was talking about the height of the receiving corps. There's outside of Nick Harbor, there's really not a big, tall guy. Malik Clark fits that mold. Malik's probably about the size Brian Edwards was, and he was considered a big receiver. So there's really kind of two. If you kind of look at the body types of the young receivers from last year, this is what they kind of need in this class, unless you just find somebody that's a stud, a no-brainer, that's 5'11", which happens. But Travis Johnson from Chesapeake, Virginia. Now, Michigan, there's a lot of competition here, too. He's 7'5" guy, Kendall Daniels Jr., Fred Johnson area. You want to continue to that's a spot that is full of players, and if Carolina can get some kind of pipeline going there, let's say you get 1 or 2 out of Maryland, D.C., 1 or 2 out of 757, that's 3 or 4 per cycle times 5. That's 20 guys from daggum great pocket areas that are located out. They're not in SEC states, and so there's no home SEC pull. Now there are other SEC pulls and Big Ten pulls. I think the Big Ten just kind of feels like that's Virginia's part of their territory. Well, the University of Virginia would be an outstanding fit in the Big Ten with their academic snobbery, right? Oh, Carruthers, Anyway, Michigan, yeah, look out for them. But he's a big, tall guy that can go up and get it 6'3.5". Micah Smith, four-star offensive lineman for Vero Beach, Florida. This is very interesting. He's a player that Lonnie Teasley and the offensive line coaching staff like. He's officially visiting. He's been kind of quiet talking about him, but he's another good quality big ugly. And from the state of Florida, there's not very many Florida guys that Carolina's in on, but he'd be a good player. JB Shabazz is a player I've talked about. He had a really good unofficial visit, 6'7", 295 pounds from North Carolina. He's definitely a tackle. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Jatavius Shivers in a way. But you can't have too many 6'7", 300-pound tackles right out of high school. 24/7 has him as a 3-star. I believe on 300 routes has him a little higher, so he's kind of a composite 4. This next guy's from Alabama, Birmingham, KJ Johnson, corner. This is an example of the 3-star that Torian Gray can take to the next level. A late riser. I think Ole Miss has talked to him a little bit. There's been some other schools come in. He's getting legit SEC offers, but really likes Carolina. I'd say, Carolina's got a pretty good shot, maybe a little over 50%. So I'll go through the last 4 just to recap. Travis Johnson, receiver from Virginia, 6'3" guy. Carolina, I would lean more towards Michigan just because that's what people have been saying, but the official is going to be key. Micah Smith, anybody's guess. That's the 4-star offensive lineman for Vero Beach. JB Shabazz, I like their chances heading into the visit. KJ Johnson, maybe like a 52, 53% prediction there. And then the final guy visiting is from South Point High School, Anthony Baxter, 335-pound offensive lineman, very raw. But watch some of his defensive clips, and he moves pretty well. So Anthony Baxter, one of the big uglies, really, really early commit. So he's coming in that first weekend. The next weekend, June the 6th. So it's back-to-back, and then I think they take a week off, and then the 20th is a big weekend. We'll talk about the 20th on a coming episode. Landon Duckworth. I talked a lot about the quarterbacks when they were in on Jared Curtis, who has since re-upped with Georgia. Brady Smeagol, who's going to Michigan, or Smigel going to Michigan, which he's from California, had some interest. I think Carolina probably could have gotten him had they pushed harder. Had he been but he wasn't the number 1 guy on the board. Mike Shula, a lot of the guys there. I think they've decided, once Curtis eliminated them, that Landon Duckworth's their guy. Now, Landon Duckworth, of course, committed super duper early to the Gamecocks. He, since it's Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, it's Gus Malzahn in Florida State, which I think he's Gus Malzahn obviously has a big rep in the state of Alabama where Landon's from. I don't know. I may have discounted Carolina's chances a little bit more than I once thought. But Mike Shula's been all over him. And Mike Shula's a good recruiter. I mean, based on some feedback I've gotten since he's been back in the college game, he hadn't forgotten how to recruit. I have a friend that actually, this is recent feedback, but like last summer, when nobody knew Mike Shula had been hired, right? There's Mike Shula walking around the football building at a camp. I mean, they were impressed with the fact the guy knew the whole recruiting board at every position. So I like that. I like the offensive coordinator that's, involved and immersed in selling the program all the time. And for a guy that was in the NFL for like 17 years, that's pretty impressive. Sometimes your NFL guys, they get back in college and, they're controlling their own destiny, because up there you got a GM and other people, and you got to play with the hand you're dealt, budget constraints, salary cap. And college, you can kind of pick your own players. A lot of Steve Spurrier said that when he got back from the Redskins. So Landon Duckworth, I wouldn't put a crystal ball for Carolina, but they keep hanging in there. All right, and they keep dancing. So who knows? Aiden Harris is the next guy. Kind of a Tonka Hemingway guy. Right now he's going to have to put on some weight, but super duper athletic and quick, just like Tonka. Um, this year, coming year's D tackle room, Devontae Miles maybe fits that mold a little bit, but there's not really a Tonka Hemingway, and that doesn't mean you can't win. Not every team has a Tonka Hemingway, but Aiden Harris, if you're looking for a guy that's similar, that's him. His twin brother Andrew Harris, who's kind of an edge outside linebacker type, is coming in. Those two are from Charlotte. I think they're going to the same school. And I believe it's still South Carolina and NC State. The Gamecocks have done a fantastic job recruiting these guys, particularly Aiden. And I think the Gamecocks are in really good shape there. Zion Giles is committed. He's coming in. He's the lone in-state guy, four-star offensive lineman from Carvers Bay. Ryan Mosley from Carrollton, Georgia. Um, Carolina's the early leader. Maybe did I put a crystal? I think I put a crystal ball in for him way back in the day. 6'4", 200, and that's the kind of guy they want. He and Travis Johnson. We'll see what happens there. I don't know that Carolina's necessarily slipped with him, but there's a lot of competition. I wouldn't put it at over 50% heading into the visit. Noah Clark from North Carolina. Now, here's a big one. D tackle, I believe he's from the Durham area. Lots of schools want 6'5", 315, and he's not like Tonka Hemingway. He's more of a big DeAndre Jules kind of guy. I know Craig from the Nana Sports chat box on the show will love him. Craig loves bigger defensive tackles. Heck, I do too. I like size, but I don't want big slow guys either though. And I think in any defensive line lineup, there's room for all of the above. But Noah Clark is a big, block eating guy, and he's from North Carolina, from D-line heaven. So if you look at the D tackle board or targets, although it shrunk because a lot of those guys ended up not visiting, you get the two out of North Carolina, Noah Clark and Aiden Harris. More power to you. Now I feel better about Aiden than I do Noah, but I feel decent about Noah right now. Keenan Britt, also from the state of Alabama, early commit to the Gamecocks. Darren Usher, who will be on later today with Bradford, had the connection there, and he committed pretty early last summer. He's stuck with it. He's taken some visits. Janelle Comby, three-star guy from Marietta, Georgia, defensive back safety. I like him. Pretty good player. Lots of SEC competition. Excuse me. Fighting a little cold here. I'm not like penciling him in my projected class, but it takes a lot to do that. So with him, he's a we'll see after the visit. And then Kosi Barnes, three-star corner from Greensboro Grimsley in North Carolina, kind of under the radar guy, but a 6'3" corner. Where have you heard that before? Could also be a safety. Another Torian Gray find right there. So, and with him, that's a different type of mystery than Cumbay, because I'm like, well, this is kind of a find. This is more of a guy that the coaches Gray and White and those guys like. They're kind of like an OKG, our kind of guy, what they would say. So I like maybe Barnes a little better than Cumbay as far as who would come in. But one's a safety and one's a corner, so take both. Take both. Take both. My mic came unplugged right there in a moment. Had to hit the pause button. My bad on that. So you got mostly out of state players coming in. You got three from Alabama. So Alabama's going to be, and like I said, recruiting Alabama's worked out for the Gamecocks. Darren Usher spent a long time at Auburn, a couple of years at Auburn under Brian Harsin, so he's familiar with the talent there. You got some two studs from Georgia. The Georgia targets this year are a little, like, numbers wise, they're not as many. I mean, Carolina probably will still end up with at least 4 or 5 players from that state, but it's interesting. Way more North Carolina players. There's a bunch, and then you kind of have an Atlantic Coast group coming in on May 30th with, North Carolina, two from North Carolina, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Vero Beach, Florida. And then it's a little more southern with Georgia and Alabama guys, but then one, two, three, four North Carolina players coming in. So North Carolina's got a lot of players this year, especially D tackle. And here we go. Here we go. Because Carolina's made some inroads in the state. Nobody's going to sit there and throw back Brian Rowe and Donovan Darden out of last year's class. Those guys were good, but it's not, big numbers out of North Carolina. It's been a long time. And we've talked about North Carolina kids and kind of the trends there. But at the same time, it's right there. And Charlotte, it's closer to Columbia than Chapel Hill and all those places. It's just, can you keep them from going to big brands and all that? The last 10 years, South Carolina has produced as a state 49 NFL draft picks. North Carolina's produced 96. The population there is closing in on 12 million. So it's a good place to go recruit. Plus, there's no SEC teams there. And the proximity to a good portion of the state with Columbia. If Clemson over the years, they've never stopped recruiting up there. They've always done well. And they've always done better than South Carolina up there. Overall, some years not, but overall they have. And so there's no reason why South Carolina can't do it. I think Clemson, for years being in the ACC, there's probably a little more familiarity with the kids growing up with Clemson than maybe South Carolina, but we'll see. And then Virginia, Maryland, DC, that's a gold mine for the Gamecocks. A gold mine. If they continue to mine it, hi ho, it's off to recruit we go. Jeez. All right, let's end it on that one. So again, we were going to have a JC and Morgan today with Mike and I. We're going to punt that till Thursday. It's college football, big picture topic. Primary audience is the Gamecock audience as far as the daily grind here at Chief Sports South Carolina. So we're going to do I'm going to do a postmortem of baseball with Jamie, and then Darren Usher, and then Phil and I will be back to answer all of your questions. I really sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode of Coffee. Those NIL dollars need to keep flowing in. So go to GamecockCoffee.com, get you some Rise and Shine gourmet coffee and some popcorn. Also going to have some, for those that want to help Garnet Trust, going to have some more information on how you can do that if you're a business owner and have credit card processing that you have to do. You can save some money and help Garnet Trust, and doesn't come out of your pocket at all. I'll have more details on that. If you are interested, just shoot me an email, jcshurburtt@gmail.com. That's my name at gmail.com. And I can go ahead and fill you in, but we'll talk about that at another time. All right. By the way, be sure to check out chiefsportsnetwork.com. And also collegefootballforever.com. Those are our two new websites. Still a little bit under construction, but they're ready to roll. Also download the Chief Sports app. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to this video right here on the YouTube page if that's how you're consuming it. JC Shurburtt with Coffee, signing off. Happy hump day, everyone. Holla at you soon.